I see attendees coming in.
Mhm.
I see the pun is in on the line. So we've got him here as well. And I actually see Stu. I don't know that they're going to be able to talk back and forth, but Stu is the president of the Ontario Chamber Executives Association. So I've been talking with him. I'm actually going to be at the event in Aurelia. I don't know if you've been to Aurelia, Roxanne. I'm going to say you haven't. Probably not. It's a
No.
small town, so it's like outside of Barrie, where I grew up. But it was a big deal because when they first legalized casinos in Ontario, like that was they got a casino there as sort of like the North Toronto casino if you weren't going to go to Niagara Falls. So it was like a huge like windfall for that like small community. But that was
What?
probably 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a while ago. We'll just give it a couple minutes for people to join. How's the weather in Vancouver today?
It's the wet coast.
Yeah.
So yeah, atmospheric river for the last few days. So rainy. So
Yeah.
you have to love all types of weather when you live here.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it for sure.
Yeah,
You know, yeah. I mean, the summer is fantastic though. You guys get great summers.
very much so.
Um, I think maybe we'll start at like 2:04. I feel like that maybe makes sense. Um, yeah. The Yeah, so I was saying beforehand, the weather here has really turned. It's like 12 degrees and kind of cloudy, and now I know so many people that have been sick over the last week. Like that first like fall illness has been running around. So it's been not a fun time with that. But and or maybe I got sick at the conference last week. And in case if anybody on the line is sick as well, hopefully I didn't give it to you. I didn't start feeling sick until Saturday, so hopefully that was not my fault, but it could have been that or it could have been the flight as well.
Yeah, we've got some people on the line. You want to?
Yeah, maybe. Okay. Yeah, let's get started. I mean, it's recorded anyway. So if there are people that miss this or show up late, we could always send it to them and share this with them at that point as well. So they'll be able to get it. So
Sure,
I guess, Roxanne, before I start, I'll just kind of start why I wanted to have this webinar with you and kind of give a little bit of an
sure.
introduction to it. And then, we'll get into some of the questions that I prepared. Obviously, you're an extremely important partner to us here at Glue Up, and the partnership that we built with you and the year that we've worked together now has been fantastic. Bringing you on board the end of last year was a big push for us and a very exciting time. And obviously, Napun, who's on the line, was a really important part of that as well. But I wanted to have you on the line because this is a chamber specific event. We only invited chambers of commerce to this
Oh,
event today. We only invited Canadian chambers.
okay.
So I wanted them to hear from you the experience of a chamber of commerce moving from another platform, and because it's a big decision and a big move, it's easy to stay with what you already have, like
Yeah,
no hiccups. You don't have to deal with the transition with everybody else and all the staff. So I wanted to get your perspective and your experience with it, and maybe you can share some of that sort of wisdom with other people, because I know that they have a lot of questions around like how it worked for you and what that's been. So just sort of getting into it, I guess I'll let you introduce yourself. You want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you've come to be at the BC Chamber of Commerce?
yeah, sure, sure. So I am Roxanne Schutz. I am the VP of Operations at the BC Chamber of Commerce. My background has always been within an operations department with organizations in primarily the private and public sector. Um, I've always sort of been in the ops departments as a leader, sort of peeling things apart, putting them back together, and kind of fell into this role or career accidentally, if you will, but I was a business process analyst and a computer operator, and I'm going to date myself here, but running DOS and mainframe systems 25-ish plus years or more ago. And, that's where I sort of fell in love with, how are we running things, and how, I need to know how things work. So, that's how I sort of went down this path. So I've done that a lot in private and public organizations. And I was introduced to the sort of nonprofit sector in 2016 when I worked for a previous association in the Lower Mainland. And part of my mandate there was to sort of assess the operations in general, all the technical softwares and business processes, and how can we be more efficient, and how can we use technology to our advantage, that kind of thing. So I loved the nonprofit world. I stayed for the reason that it attracts a certain kind of people and staff to it. They want to help, intrinsically. They're just helpers. So, I loved it. And always in a nonprofit association environment, it's a small team with limited resources and capacity, and everybody wears multiple hats. So, love the nonprofit association world. So I stayed. And how I got to the BC Chamber is I had worked previously with the current president and CEO of the BC Chamber of Commerce, who I believe started in 2021. And part of her mandate was to rebuild. There's a 3-year strategic plan to rebuild, which includes, of course, operations and business processes and all that. So when I left my last role and was looking for a new adventure, I was flattered she reached out and said, I'm doing a rebuild. And of course, I can't refuse that, because I'm a bit of a self-proclaimed nerd, that I need to know
Yeah.
how everything's working and how we can, what we can do to turn it around. So I said yes, and I started in 2022. So that's my background. I've always been sort of in an operations leader role, looking at systems, business processes, and how we can work smarter, obviously, not harder, right?
Perfect. So in this role, what was your mandate coming into the position?
So the mandate for me when I started was to, of course, support the president and CEO in the 3-year rebuild. I believe we're halfway through, so we have another full year left of our plan. So my role was to come in and do a complete operational audit, which included like IT, technology, business processes, and everything. So that was my mandate when I joined the BC Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, so then going into that, understanding that mandate, at what point did you make the decision that you wanted to look at other technology platforms, and what brought you to make that decision?
Oh, many, many things, of course, because when you go into a new world and there's okay, number one. So number one, part of the strat plan, is like what are we working with? In our case, we had a lack of systems in general. Like we did not, our database was primarily being done off of Excel sheets. So I'll start there. We didn't have a
Okay.
database. They had changed platforms prior, and so everything was pretty manual. We didn't have a CRM. We didn't have, what was the biggest problem we were trying to solve, was my question when I went in. Like, what are we trying to solve here? In our case, it was lack of any automated processes. There was no CRM, finance, communications. Of course, we had 100 chambers of commerce and boards of trade that are members, and there's no connectivity,
Right.
so that's number one. Number two, what was our budget? What's our staffing capacity? What's our technical ability on the team? So that leads you to start thinking about, okay, so A, we don't have a system. B, we have limited money and capacity and resources. And C, that's where you start thinking we need to do something to help make our operations a bit more efficient. We need to get connectivity. We need to have, obviously technology to help us connect, engage, automate processes. And so that's where you start thinking, are we looking at an all-in-one solution? Are we looking at a customization? Well, that's where money comes in. And in a non-profit world, typically there's very limited resources financially to implement technologies.
Sure.
So yeah.
Okay. So then based on that point, understanding kind of where you came from there and how you got to that decision,
Yeah.
How did you then start the process of evaluating platforms? What were the key criteria you were looking for when making the selection?
So um, the key criteria is always about what's the biggest problem we're trying to solve here? Obviously, some operational efficiencies, right? So we need a
Mhm.
CRM, we need a capability for invoicing, we need a capability to connect, our 100 chambers of commerce and boards of trade across the province. So we were using multiple third-party softwares to communicate and to so we had Eventbrite for our events. We had MailChimp for our marketing. We had Nutshell for a CRM. We had Slack for communications, and we're using Dropbox to share files. Now, if you think about that, that's a lot of third-party softwares we were trying to
Sure.
manage. We could engage our communities across the province. So when you're at a provincial level, there's a lot of, the reach is much larger. It's not like it's hard to connect across a larger
Right.
region, right? So that was a huge consideration. Budget was a very big consideration, and how many staff are going to be using a platform, meaning how user friendly does it have to be? Like, we don't have a tech team and a
Okay.
lot of abilities. So that's really important. Is the system user friendly? Could we all use it? And I have to take, if I can use it, that's my measure stick, right? Then everybody can. Can the team get what they need out of a system that's flexible, to be able to do the jobs we need to do and work as efficiently as we can? So if you can solve 75 to 80% of the things you're looking for operationally, then you're doing well. And that's the measurement I use. The system may not be perfect. So when you consider an all-in-one, and there's a big
Yeah.
debate, you know, do you go with an all-in-one out of the box product,
Mhm.
or do you go plug and play? Because I've been on both sides. In private,
Sure.
there's a lot more budget that you can play with. So if you want to do a custom type of build, that's great. If you have the time, because that typically takes a really long time to do, and B, you have endless resources. You know,
Yeah.
um, but for smaller organizations, or smaller teams, I should say, in budgets, an all-in-one really is ideal because it takes away the pain of plug and play, third-party maintenance. Um, is it going to be perfect? I'm going to tell you, there's no perfect system out there. In the
Right.
decades I've been doing this, I've yet to find one. But if, like I said, your measure is like, if I can solve 80% of what I need to do with a system, then you're doing really well. And,
Right.
if there's also, the other thing is, if there's flexibility, like if there's more than one way to use the system, that's super important. So like, you have your business processes, and if you're trying to take processes the same way that you always do it and try to make the system work around that, that's going to give you roadblocks sometimes. So I always look at it as, I'm trying to achieve this. How can I use the system in its current functionality and state out of the box without
Yeah.
custom to make it suit our needs? And we got that as well. So that was a huge consideration. So those are my main points. What am I trying to solve? What's the team capacity? What's the budget? Um, and in a nonprofit sector, it was a really good fit.
So just like a little bit more detail potentially on like the actual sort of process did you use? Did you decide to like go out to RFP? How did you look at a bunch of different vendors? Did you just kind of like start looking, start talking to a few companies, and then build some kind of like Excel to make a decision? Like,
I
what
did.
was the process for your org, and how long did that take
So
you to make?
our process, prior to even considering my first year there, like I said, was the audit and you know
Right.
platform. So what I typically use is, I do a scope of work. And so what a scope of work for me is, what I've always used is, it's an Excel sheet, really, that sort of maps
Okay.
out the different functionality I'm looking for. And I really have to be clear on, what are my have to haves versus my nice to haves, right? Because we're trying to get from A to B in a very short time frame. So that took me about 6 months to really map out for the BC Chamber when I started, right? So it's a scope of work on, what are you looking for? my absolute functionality, and then the business process mapping. Those two things go hand in hand. So you really got to know, your scope of work. Like, this is a have to have. I can't move forward without this functionality. And this is really kind of a nice to have. It'd be nice to have
Right.
it, but I don't need it to go live to improve our lives, right? And move forward. So that scope of work is really important. And then, of course, the business process mapping. So streamlining that before you even start the process is a good idea. Like, what are we doing today that makes sense? What
Right.
doesn't? Change it before you actually move into a new platform, and look at opportunities. So myself, is familiar with a lot of doing this for so many decades. I'm
Yeah.
familiar with a lot of Canadian
Decades.
association
That was like
management.
5 years.
No, decades, like, for systems, and associations. Um, I'm familiar with a lot of the association management softwares that are out there. I've looked at a lot of them in Canada per se. And I'm familiar with so many different types. Like, again, there's a lot of plug and plays that are great options if you have the money and time. And then there's some all-in-one solutions that are pretty good. But I think the difference maker was when I got to see the community, and I'm just going to speak for the BC Chamber, the community engagement through communities. It was a first for an all-in-one product that really was, bang, our first number one. What are we trying to solve? How do we connect all of our chambers and boards of trade across the province
Mhm.
into, in a platform? Well, we really liked that in the community engagement feature and module, and we've used it to the max. So that was a huge win for us. So that is where I sort of compared. I've looked at. I didn't do an RFP because I was myself familiar with a lot of platforms that were out there. I just
Sure.
did a lot of research in the ones and narrowed it down to what are the ones that we could actually feasibly look at that are kind of out of the box, that have similar functionality, but what can meet our needs the most. And glue up kind of came into that
I mean,
that list.
the way you described it and mapping out all your processes and like what were the requirements versus sort of the nice to haves and
Yeah,
taking that like highly analytical approach. I've seen customers that have gone out to RFP like through consultants, and that's
yeah,
effectively what the consultants are doing, right? They're sitting down with those customers,
right,
mapping all that stuff out, and then going out to RFP saying, here are the things that we need. So you
right.
effectively were your own consultant on this.
Well,
Yeah.
we were. I mean, but I think if whoever an organization is, it's if you, I don't know where the who has bench strength on the team, like who's really involved in the operation and the processes. Your team is your best, is your best resource when doing that. So I was very working very closely with our finance person. That's your key buddy, your best buddy when you're doing when you're
Yeah.
doing any sort of platform migration. And the finance, what do you need? Like, how does it, what are you currently using? How do you need to have your audit trail? How do you need to, so working with the team directly, our events and partnerships person, like, what is it you're looking for? What do you need to get your job done? So I think an organization, even though albeit small, if there's one key player, you don't have to be a consultant, and you just have to have an operational person invested in understanding their business processes and understanding what their team is looking for, and then working with the glue up team directly to sort of connect those dots, right? So I would say the biggest investment for anybody, if they were looking at glue up specifically, is to the biggest amount of time is really understanding your processes and then investing in that customer support when you're looking with glue up. So lessons learned, and I assume you're going to want to talk about that. But
Yeah,
I
sure.
think the biggest investment and the best part of when you going with glue up is that whole onboarding and investing in that customer success manager, the
Yeah.
CSM, I guess, as you call it, because they are almost like a consultant to some degree, where they really know the system and your data and processes, and you work together to sort of figure out what the next steps are to go forward and how to make that happen. I don't, in my opinion, I mean, because I've been doing this for so long and I'm not a consultant, I'm just a nerd, right? That likes to figure out how stuff works really at the end of the day, right? So I think that that's an important thing, like investing in that customer success manager is kind of like your consultant to some degree, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I looked at it.
I guess to sort of come almost back to not the beginning, but very early stage here. How did you hear about Glue Up? And like, what were your initial impressions?
Well, when I am sourcing out systems, what I like to do is I like to, when I see demos, you know how you can get a demo, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of companies will show you. It depends who you're working with too. Are you working with a digital agency? You're working with a technical agency. Two very different things. There's development that happens on the back end, so that's important. Number one. Um, some companies will show you wireframes of their system. That doesn't work, typically when you're trying to really get into, I want to see the back end and I want to see how it actually works with live data. So I
Right.
believe we'd had a partnerships person or a resource that was with BC Chamber, who's now gone, but they brought Glue Up to me. I think there was some connectivity there, or reach out, and they passed along and said, here's one to look at. And I'm like, yeah, kind of off the side of my desk, right? I've never heard of them, right?
Yeah.
So I have to say, when we started uh, connecting and talking, and you and Glue Up, and you guys were excellent in showing me the back end. Like I could actually get in and see the system and see how it worked and see how the data was behaving and the functionality live. And that's huge. If you can get your hands on it and actually see it and understand it, then that's a selling feature for me. Is I
Yeah.
need to see it. I can't look at wireframes. I need to actually get in, and you guys are very transparent in showing that it does this, but may not do this, but we could maybe achieve it this way. So it's that whole um, seeing it, feeling it, and understanding it right from the get go. So that's where Glue Up kind of went from somebody I didn't know to one of the top two that I was considering. Um,
Okay. And
so
so
that's
in
that's
that,
that's
sorry, sorry. In that consideration, when you were doing that evaluation, you mentioned a little bit about the communities feature. Were there other features that were like very important to you in the selection process or
oh
criteria?
yeah, yeah, the CRM obviously, and the communications platform. So and billing, like just in general, all of the out of the box features were important. So we do run events. We don't run as many as a local, regional chamber of commerce or board of trade, because we're provincially, have a four signature. But it out of the box events, great. We could automate that, get rid of Eventbrite. Perfect. The CRM was huge. I mean, you're taking something from Excel and manual, tracking, and you're implementing it into a CRM. Awesome. That gets rid of some of that manual paperwork. The billing, the automatic workflows, that was huge. Obviously, for obvious reasons, because we have a finance team of one. So, automating that for them was important. The marketing, we work with, or had been working, we still work with some contractors, but we don't have a lot of resource and capacity to do that. But in order for us to, like, we got rid of MailChimp, there was data integrity, keeping track of your lists and your subscribers and everything, and being able to sort of put that in one place. That was a huge win for us. And the fact that our team learned and adopted it, so that we now have people internally, we're less dependent on contractors to do some work, and more
Okay.
able to just do it. Anybody on the team can actually go in and do a campaign, and design it, and fire it out, and get communication happening. But the community itself was really a big win for us, for our chamber network. Our corporate network, maybe not as engaged, but still real-time information, especially with the app. But that chamber network, we're talking 100 chambers and boards across the province, and to be able to put them in a community, and then have groups within the community, so that they have real-time conversations, connectivity, sharing of resources, asking questions. Like, they don't have to go anywhere else anymore. They don't have to go to Slack. They don't have to go use a third party. It's all in one place, and they love it. So we've had a lot of really positive response from that network in particular, that they love Glue Up. And of course, again, the continuous evolvement. So and that's another thing when choosing a partner, right? Is
Yeah.
that you have partners that their out of the box has been developed so far, and then maybe there's not a lot of more work on it, right? So you have to pick a partner, or when you pick a partner that is continuously developing and adding new features and evolving their product, that's super important. Having a good partner and having a partner that's willing to keep their out of the box as innovative as they can. So the most recent thing that, and it's a huge hot topic because people are like, oh, AI, we just did a thing on it this week in Small Business
Yeah.
Week, right? So the introduction of it, the pros and cons, the controversy, but you have to start somewhere. You have to
Yeah.
change your die. It's just one of those things when technology needs to stay current and always evolve. And seeing actual development of the product from GlueUp as we continue is great. So that Chat GPT on the marketing
Yep.
module was a huge win for us because again, we don't have a marketing communications person quite yet. We're hoping that's
Yeah.
year 3 of our build, right? That we can
Okay.
continue to evolve and build our team. But so for us, as that's not my area of expertise, but when we're doing communications or campaigns or anything like that, we're actually using that feature, and it's been a great help in helping us up our game with communications. So the fact that was just implemented, and if people want to dip their toes into some new technology, that's a really it's a great opportunity to do that. And the fact that GlueUp's keeping it current, evolved, continually updating based on their clients' feedback. And believe me, you get how much from everybody, I'm sure, ourselves included, right? Like I said,
We
not
appreciate the
perfect,
feedback though. It's
not
helpful, right? Like
perfect, but you know what?
it's a partnership.
It's a partnership, and that's the really probably the most important thing when selecting a on my list anyhow, is that partnership, because you can't move forward without a really good partnership and support system in place with your partner. So the partnership, the communication and the support is invaluable, really, because it could be radio silence once you go live and you're like, oh, this is not perfect, I'd love to see this and we want to change that. But I think the opportunities to plug into regular education, so which I took all of the things I could take before we even started considering going live,
Right.
and really plugging into our success manager and utilizing yourself and Napoon. And I probably sent well over 150 questions, I'm sure of it, at the beginning before we even decided to go with GlueUp. And I have to say that Napoon, I'm going to give him a shout out, answered every single one of them, answered every single question that I had and came back to me. And I was like, and right away, I was like surprised at that sort of responsiveness. So I was like, this is a really good partner, willing to go that extra mile with us, right? And really make sure that we understand what we are implementing and understand, what we're getting. And if we can't get what we want, what may be coming or not, or how we could use it differently to suit our needs. So that partnership is a key piece as well. So
Yeah.
super important.
That's fantastic to hear. I really appreciate those words. And I agree. I mean, our CEO has always been really focused on ensuring that we're improving the platform, and with our product development team, like they're always looking for how can it be better, how can it be more intuitive, what things do we need to add to the platform to improve it and make it better. So it's exciting to be in an environment like that. Definitely. The one thing I also want to ask you too, because it does specifically for the chamber world as well, like we have a small team here in Canada when we're in Toronto. How important was Canada, like, versus were you looking at platforms that had no presence in Canada, or did it matter to you, or not so much? It was like we were going to get the best platform, no matter where they were located.
Yeah, I mean, how I looked at it was, and I know it's a question that always comes up for chambers and boards and people that are considering softwares and stuff. They like it to be obviously local. That's important. And for us, we have, there's Canadian representation, obviously, but for us, it was more about the product and the partnership. And I mean, it's an international company.
It
So,
is. Absolutely. Yeah.
and it's built on a platform that's well known. It's a really robust platform that's like a candy store for developers, if you will, because there's so much they can get from the AWS, you know, Drupal world, if you will. So, it's a very, all those things are considered. So, um, and AWS, there's hosting in Canada as well. So it's not so important as to, it was more about the system
Hmm.
and the partnership and the software itself and kind of where
Hmm.
it's built.
Okay. Yeah, that all makes sense. So then moving into after the selection was made, how was the onboarding experience with Glue Up?
The onboarding was, I think, pretty good. It was pretty good, but I have to say, lessons learned on myself, right? So
Okay.
I would have invested more in the customer success manager opportunity, because that's your consultant, if you will, right? So, and I would have invested more time in really learning about the data, and how it works together. Like, the one thing I do know is in associations in Canada, if you will, it's really the management system typically works, in my experience anyhow, is it's from a company level, right? So it's like companies with people that belong to those companies, members that belong to those companies. So it was a different way of looking at it. So in glue up, understanding the data is like, it's a member is the person, whereas the membership is the membership you know that's attached to the member. So it's really just, it's kind of flipping it a little bit and understanding
Hmm.
those things, really working with that success manager to really understand the data, and the mapping, like how you need to know your data, I guess, number one, understand
Yeah.
your data, and the
Yeah.
relationships with it. And then understand, how that translates into the glue up system, which is just a little bit different than how we typically think of it. So that
Right.
was
How was the data that you were pulling from other systems? Like, was that like, oh, I should have prepared a little bit more on that? Or you're like, no, no, I knew I needed this data. I already had it all and I was ready to go.
well, we were fortunate that we had our data, ourselves. We owned our data it was on spreadsheets. So I mean, I've been
Sure.
with other companies where we had to pull our data from a different system, and that's a tricky thing, because
Uh-huh.
that's a tricky thing. But you got to get your data no matter what. So understanding where it is and understanding how to access it, that's a huge um, part of the investment of time that you need to do up front when considering anything. Like, where's my data today? How do I get access to my data? What does it look like? What are the fields and what does it equal before you consider a system that you're going to put it into, right?
Yeah.
So that's an important
Um,
piece.
yeah. So given the experience that you had, and I get that, you're a large provincial organization that makes it a little bit more challenging. How much time would you allocate, or would you suggest a chamber allocate for the transition, like to be prepared for? Like, okay, I was to sign up, like, how long do you think that you would need to be able to go live successfully?
I think that, well, because our data came from Excel sheets, it was a little easier for us. If your data lives in another system, with another provider, I think understanding how much time it would take to access that data or get a download of it, that kind of thing, that plays a role too. So I would say, typically before you start thinking about migrating, it really depends. I would allocate myself uh, 8 months, 8 to 12 months for this type of a thing. Just, I know you can get it up faster, but if I'm talking about a team that has no consultant, that has no, small team, maybe one person dedicated to, look at, map out what they need and work with the team. Like, to me, that can be done, in a good 8 months. So, um, we did it in a shorter time period, as you know. So we
Yeah.
signed in I want to say like a January, and we were live by June 1st. That
Right.
was our deadline.
Yeah.
So we did it
Yeah.
in 6 months. Is it doable? For sure. Is it, a tight timeline? Typically, that would be a tight timeline, but it really depends on where your data is today and
Yeah.
and how you can get access to it, right? The rest, I think, is fairly simple working with GlueUp. Like understanding it and prepping it to put into a new system, that was all super easy. The migration part, probably one of the simplest I've ever had. I imported all my own data with Excel sheets up into the system, and that's pretty insane that we were able to do that. But I mean, again, it's really just understanding the data and what field you're going to map it to, and you hit import and in it goes. So that part's the easy part. It's the prep that's the longest
Right.
part.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now that you're live and your members have been using the system for a while, how would you say GlueUp has improved their experience? Or
Well,
the
I would
experience that is offered. Sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. Again, for our provincial network,
Hmm.
excellent. They are in there. What we did is when we created that community for the chamber network specifically, so we created a community for them. We created a community for our corporate members. Of course, we have a community for governance, that kind of thing, and we have 4 communities. Within those communities, we have groups. So in our chamber network community, we created some groups for regions that want to really connect together. But what we did do is we made champions from our team for every group we created. So, for instance, and I think that's part of success. If you're going to really take advantage of that community feature, which for us was a big win, you need to
Yeah.
have a champion on the team to be able to engage with your audience, right? So, our policy director is the champion of that group. So all of the policy people that love, you know, policy and advocacy, that want to talk policy and that kind of stuff, they have a champion of that group
Uh-huh.
and can answer questions live. They can engage online. Off they go. We have a marketing and resources group. Of course, we have a champion for that group for anything that anybody needs. For marketing, there's an executive director group. So that's all of the leaders across the province that need to have conversations with each other in running their organizations. And we have our director of member experience, that's the champion in that group. So, having a champion in there where they have real time access to connect with our team, as small as it is, has been a game changer for us, I have to say. So, real time notifications. One of the requests was, not everybody wants to be harassed all day long with notifications or emails about what's happening in the community, right? It's like, I don't care about that, right? So we asked, and it could have been asked from other people, I'm not sure, but we asked, in those notifications, can you put at least a little bit of the subject so that people can either ignore it or if it's important to them, go read it. And that rolled out, I'm not sure, not like maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
But huge. Like one of our small chambers up in Lytton was like, thank you, game changer for me, because they're all so busy with,
Yeah.
their own communities and community work that they want to be plugged in. But just even getting that, which seems little, but is not little to a lot that are really busy, right? So yeah, it's been great, I have to say, as far as that goes. There's some hiccups and bumps, but nothing that's a showstopper, as I like to say.
Okay. Just for everyone that's in the session, if anybody has any questions they want me to ask as well, just put it in the Q&A. I just have 1 or 2 more questions for you, Roxanne. So, based on what you're saying, then now that you've been live and everyone's using it, how has the customer support experience been since you've been live?
Good. So if I've had an issue, I mean, I will obviously submit a customer support ticket for things that might seem funky. So maybe a date on a invoice that's not jiving with something or whatever the case may be. But on top of that, I always have access to you guys. So I'm not sure that's something you want to put out there and promise to the world, but it's been awesome. So 9 times out of 10, it's like I get support not only from the support team, which logs and gets the support group working on it, whether it goes to tech or whether it goes to development or whether it goes to wherever. I get a 24-hour response right away on sort of what the issue was, or whether it's something that has to be that's considered development, or that is an actual error, right? Because we're not going to know everything. There's a lot of functionality you may or may not use, right? So, you know,
Mm.
I tried to break it as best I could. I did, you know, a few fun things in there because, you know, I like to break stuff if I can. But no, the support, the customer support on top of the additional classes you guys run. And I think you have a Friday session that clients can
Do.
join.
Yeah.
I haven't gone because I haven't needed to, but that's an open forum where you can ask questions. So if I had a dedicated person to do that, that would be awesome. But my direct access to Napoon and yourself has been really, really good. Now, I don't know how sustainable that is for you guys, but it's been awesome for us.
I mean, we appreciate the support that you give to us, and you know, we're obviously there for all of our customers, that we want to make sure everyone's successful and understand your business. And so, you know, any issues that you might have, you know, potential customers down the road might have those issues as well. So
Right.
it's important
Yeah.
to be able to understand them
Yeah.
and be able to manage that.
Yeah.
Um, the last sort of thing that I was going to mention here is, oh, I should mention on the Friday hours, because that did come up. Yeah, it's Friday at noon here in the Eastern Standard Time. So I guess 9 a.m. for you out west. But yeah, that's done by customer success, and anybody can come and join and ask any questions they have, or you could just come and listen to what
Right.
other questions that people have, so you're able to get more information that way.
Yeah.
And so, like, the last question I was going to give to you is just kind of like an open forum. Like, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you think people should know, or any other ideas that you had about your experience overall?
Um, my experience was obviously a positive one, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, I'm sure. But I'm not sure they've ever connected with a partner and you know, talk about how great my experience was. And I took the opportunity because, you know, we often, you know, you'll certainly shout about your negative ones, but you don't often take the time to talk about your positive ones. So that's why I really wanted to be here today, honestly, because it was a super positive experience for our very small group, primarily myself and Miranda, who's a contractor that I work with. There was just the two of us, and we did it with a two-man show. So I think that speaks volumes in itself. If you have somebody who's obviously up for the challenge, that wants to work with Glue Up, like I said, that for us was a game changer. The partnership, when we asked you guys to, you know, come join us at an AGM and support the launch of a new platform, you said yes. So I mean, you know, that to us was again another that was another win. Like it's a true partner that wants to sort of work with you, you know, and make sure they're there to support you every step of the way. I don't know how, you know, that's rare in business. So, you know, when you find those partnerships, you got to go with it.
I really appreciate those words, and I feel the same way about the partnership. It's been a great business relationship, and obviously getting to know you personally has been great as well. You know, we've had certainly some fun along the way as well, and it was great to be able to be in person with you. And it didn't hurt that it was Whistler as a
Yeah.
location. It was
Yeah.
a nice time.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Sure.
but I don't think that there are any other questions, so I guess we'll leave it there. But I really appreciate you taking this time of your day to do this, Roxanne. It really very helpful for us,
Not a
and
problem at all.
hopefully others will find this helpful as well.
I hope so. I hope so. So thank you for the invite.
Okay, great. I guess I will end the call there. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and we'll be sure to get this out to the people who were unable to join today. Thank you, Roxanne, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.